My name's Paula, I'm 32 years old, and if you had told me a year ago that my own family would try to corner me like a pack of wolves during what was supposed to be a celebration of love, I would have laughed. But here I am, still replaying every second of that night in my head. I swear, you don't forget the exact moment you realize your family never really loved you, they just loved what you could give them. I own a small but growing logistics company based in Houston. I built it from nothing, late nights, endless loans, scraping by on ramen while my friends were settling into comfortable jobs. And now, it's worth more than my entire family combined could have dreamed of. That's where the problem started. My younger brother, Daniel, was always the golden child. The one Mom said was destined for big things, even though he's never held down a job for more than a year. When he got engaged to his high school sweetheart, Megan, my parents went all out for the wedding. I was fine with that. It wasn't until I got there that I realized I was walking into a trap. It happened during the reception, right after dinner. I was still holding my champagne flute when Dad leaned in and said, "Paula, we need to talk about something important." Then suddenly Daniel, Mom, and even Megan's parents circled around like this had been planned for months. They wanted me to sell my company to Daniel, just like that. As if the years of my sweat, sacrifices, and endless grind meant nothing. They wanted to hand it over to him because, according to Mom, family businesses should stay with the men. I laughed at first, thinking it was some sick joke. But the way they all looked at me, dead serious, made my stomach drop. I told them no. Clear, firm, and final. That's when Mom's face twisted. She grabbed her wine glass and, in front of over 100 wedding guests, poured it down my dress. The gasp in the room was louder than the music. I stood there, dripping red wine, my heart pounding like it would break my chest. And then I heard myself say, steady and louder than I thought possible, "I'm done being your daughter." And then I walked out. Walking out of that wedding hall felt like stepping into another life. My heels clicked on the marble floor, the cold night air hit my skin, and for the first time in years, I felt free, humiliated, yes, but free. I didn't even bother grabbing my coat from the coat check. I just wanted distance between me and those people who called themselves my family. I drove back to my apartment in silence. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing, calls from Mom, Daniel, even some relatives I hadn't spoken to in months. I turned it face down on the passenger seat, each vibration rattling through me like a warning I didn't want to hear. When I finally pulled into my parking garage, I sat in the car with the engine off for nearly an hour. My dress was ruined, my mascara had run down my cheeks, but I kept replaying the moment I said those words, "I'm done being your daughter." The next morning, the fallout started. A dozen missed calls, voicemails filled with Mom's shrill accusations. "How could you embarrass your brother on his big day? You're selfish. We raised you, you owe us." Dad's voice was calmer, but no less manipulative. "Think this through, Paula. You can't just abandon your family. You'll regret this." But here's the thing, I didn't regret it. Not one bit. What I felt was anger. A cold, sharp anger that settled deep inside me. They had tried to strip away everything I worked for. And when I refused, they tried to humiliate me into submission. The first person I called wasn't any of them. It was my best friend, Allison. We've known each other since college, and she's one of the few people who's seen me grind for this business from day one. She came over with bagels and coffee, sat across from me at my kitchen table, and said, "You realize they're going to come after you harder now, right?" I nodded. I knew Allison was right. My family wasn't going to let this go. Daniel's pride couldn't take the hit, and Mom had probably already rewritten the story in her head to make me the villain. But sitting there, sipping burnt coffee and watching the sun creep through my blinds, I also realized something else. I wasn't going to let them win. For years, I played the good daughter. I showed up when I was told, I swallowed their insults, I let Daniel be the star. That ended last night. If they wanted a war, then fine, they'd get one. And this time, I was going to win. The first shot in this war came faster than I expected. 2 days after the wedding, I walked into my office, and my assistant, Claire, looked pale. She handed me a folder with shaking hands. "Paula, you need to see this." Inside were copies of emails, anonymous, but clearly written with inside knowledge, sent to some of my biggest clients. The message? That my company was unstable, that I was considering selling, and that they should look for more reliable partners. My stomach turned cold. Who else would have the nerve to do this but Daniel and my parents? It was sloppy, of course. They didn't realize I'd built my reputation on transparency and grit. My clients trust me because I've always been straight with them, even when the news wasn't good. But the fact that they tried to sabotage me like that lit something in me. They weren't just after my business, they wanted to destroy me. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with Allison again, but this time I wasn't crying or replaying the wedding. I was planning. "They think they can corner me," I said, tapping a pen against my notebook, "but they don't know what I know about them. Because here's the truth, my family had secrets. Secrets they thought were buried, secrets I'd kept quiet about for years because I still had some twisted loyalty to them. Dad's consulting work that was really a front for tax evasion. Mom's gambling debts she pretended didn't exist. And Daniel? The reason he could never hold a job wasn't just laziness. He'd been fired twice for harassment, something my parents paid to hush up. I looked at Allison and said, "They wanted to humiliate me in public? Fine. I'll show them what humiliation really looks like." We sketched out the beginnings of a plan. I wasn't going to do anything reckless or illegal, that wasn't me. But I was going to shine a light on every ugly corner they'd tried to keep hidden. Slowly. Methodically. Until the golden family image they clung to shattered beyond repair. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like their daughter. I felt like their reckoning. I knew exactly where to start, Daniel. He'd been the golden child my whole life, the one mom and dad bent over backwards to protect. But unlike them, Daniel didn't have the sense, or the discipline, to cover his tracks. If I wanted to strike a blow that would make them realize I wasn't playing games anymore, he was the easiest target. I spent a few days gathering what I already had. Old emails, HR complaints I'd seen back when he asked me to help him clean up his resume. He'd been fired from 2 separate companies for harassment, both times swept under the rug because Dad pulled strings and paid settlements. But what Daniel never realized was that one of the women he harassed had reached out to me afterward, furious at how her case was handled. She gave me everything, screenshots, messages, even a voice recording. I had tucked it away, not wanting to get involved at the time. Now, it was ammunition. Allison and I drafted a careful email, anonymous but sharp, and sent it to Megan, the new wife. I didn't dump everything, not yet. Just a taste. Enough to plant doubt. A screenshot of a late-night text Daniel sent to his coworker, with words that made even me cringe. 2 days later, Megan's sister posted a vague but pointed tweet. "Crazy how some men pretend to be perfect husbands when their past says otherwise." Eyes. It spread fast among their circle. Daniel must have been losing his mind, because my mother called me that night, her voice frantic. "What did you do, Paula?" she hissed. I didn't even pretend to play dumb. I didn't do anything. "Maybe you should ask your son why women keep quitting around him." She sputtered, furious, but I hung up before she could throw her usual venom at me. For once, I was the one ending the conversation. That weekend, I heard from a mutual friend that Megan had left Daniel's apartment to stay with her parents, for a little space. That was just step 1. I wasn't out to destroy his marriage, though he'd probably managed that himself. What I wanted was to take the shine off him. To make people see him for who he really was. And from the whispers already circling, I knew it was working. The golden boy's crown was beginning to slip. If Daniel's crown was slipping, my parents were scrambling to glue it back on. I could almost picture them sitting in their spotless suburban kitchen, Mom wringing her hands and Dad pacing in his undershirt, muttering about how I was trying to ruin the family. They didn't realize I wasn't trying. I was succeeding. But I wasn't done. My parents had always believed they were untouchable, especially Dad. He built this image of himself as a respectable consultant, the kind of man neighbors waved to and bankers shook hands with. But I knew the truth. His consulting was a shell operation. He'd been fudging invoices and underreporting income for years, which explained how he could afford to keep bailing Daniel out of his screw-ups. I didn't want to go nuclear right away. I wanted them to feel the pressure slowly. So, my first step was quiet. I gathered all the records I'd kept over the years, old tax forms he'd asked me to look at when I still worked as his unpaid helper, spreadsheets he thought I was too naive to understand. But I had understood. I had kept copies. Through a friend of Allison's, I connected with a journalist who specialized in financial fraud. We met at a coffee shop, me in a baseball cap and sunglasses like some wannabe spy. I slid a folder across the table and said, "I just want the truth to come out. Nothing more, nothing less." The journalist didn't promise anything, but I could see the way her eyes lit up as she flipped through the documents. She smelled blood. A week later, Dad's name appeared in an investigative blog. Not front-page news yet, just a piece questioning the legitimacy of his business. Enough to make his phone start ringing. Enough to make Mom's friends whisper. Enough to put cracks in their carefully curated facade. And then came Mom. She was the kind of woman who lived for appearances, hair appointments every Thursday, charity galas, designer everything. But beneath the pearls and polite smiles, she had her own demons. Gambling. Online casinos, underground poker nights, you name it. She thought no one knew, but I did. I'd seen the credit card bills. I wasn't ready to expose her fully, not yet. Instead, I made one anonymous call, to her favorite charity committee chair. Just a little nudge, maybe you should check where your donor's money is really going. By the end of that week, Mom was quietly removed from 2 boards she'd bragged about nonstop. The look on her face must have been priceless. They thought I'd be the one humiliated after that wedding. But piece by piece, I was stripping away the masks they wore so proudly. And I was just getting started. The backlash came hard and fast. I was sitting at my desk one Tuesday morning, finalizing a deal with a new client, when Claire buzzed me. "Your mother's here." Her voice had that nervous edge, like she wasn't sure if she should even let the woman past reception. I sighed. "Send her in." Mom swept into my office like a storm in designer heels. Her face was perfectly made up, but I could see the cracks, the smudged concealer under her eyes, the way her hands shook when she set her purse on my desk. "Paula," she said, her voice clipped, "enough is enough." I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. "Oh. Enough of what?" "You know exactly what. Those lies about your father. Those disgusting rumors about Daniel. And now the charities. Do you have any idea what you're doing to this family?" "Yes," I said, calm as stone. "I'm holding up a mirror." Her composure slipped then. She slammed her palm against my desk, startling Claire outside the door. "We made you, Paula. Everything you are, you owe to us. And this is how you repay us? By trying to destroy us?" I laughed. It wasn't planned, but I couldn't help it. The sound came out sharp, bitter. "You didn't make me. You ignored me. You belittled me. You tried to take what I built and hand it to Daniel like a party favor. That night at the wedding? That was my breaking point. And now, Mom, I'm done pretending we're some perfect family." She stared at me, her mouth trembling like she wanted to say something, but the words wouldn't come. Finally, she hissed, "You'll regret this," grabbed her purse, and stormed out. An hour later, my father called. His voice was icy. "We know it's you, Paula. This ends now. Or you're going to regret it." That was the thing, they thought threats would scare me back into submission. But every attempt they made only fueled me more. They had spent years controlling me with shame, guilt, and obligation. Those chains were gone now. That night, Allison came over with takeout and we spread everything across my kitchen table: files, emails, printouts. "They're going to hit back harder," she warned. "Let them," I said. "The truth is on my side. And if they want a war, I'll finish it." What I didn't know yet was just how far my family was willing to go to protect their image, and how much darker this was about to get. After Mom's little office performance and Dad's phone call, I knew they weren't just angry, they were scared. And scared people make mistakes. That was exactly what I needed. The deeper I dug, the uglier things got. One night, I was going through old files on an external hard drive I hadn't touched in years. Back when I started my company, I had used Dad's accountant temporarily, mostly because he insisted. I hated it at the time. His people always looked down on me like I was a kid playing CEO. But it turned out to be a blessing, because buried in those records were transactions that made my blood run cold. Not just tax evasion. Money laundering. Transfers from Dad's consulting firm to accounts overseas. And the kicker? Some of those transfers had Daniel's name attached. It wasn't just Dad. He had pulled Daniel into it too. Which meant Daniel wasn't just the family screw-up, he was complicit. I stared at the documents for hours, my chest tight. This wasn't just family drama anymore. This was criminal. The next day, I called Allison. We met at her apartment, and I laid everything out on her coffee table. She leaned forward, scanning the pages, her jaw tightening. "Paula, this isn't small-time stuff. If this gets out, your dad could go to prison. And Daniel too." I swallowed hard. Part of me hesitated. Was I really ready to take it that far? To blow my own family's crimes wide open? But then I remembered the wedding night. Mom's smug face as she dumped wine down my dress. Dad's condescending tone, like I was just a placeholder until Daniel was ready to take over. Daniel smirking, waiting for me to just hand over everything I had built. They weren't family anymore. They were predators. And predators deserved to be exposed. Still, I didn't want to tip my hand too fast. I needed leverage. So, instead of going straight to the authorities, I decided to test how much power this information could give me. I printed one incriminating document, sealed it in an envelope, and had it delivered anonymously to my parents' house. No note, no explanation, just enough to make their hearts race. Within 24 hours, I got a text from Daniel. No greeting, no small talk. Just one line. "What do you want, Paula?" For the first time in my life, Daniel was the one asking me for mercy. And that was only the beginning. When I saw Daniel's text, "What do you want, Paula?" I didn't reply right away. I let him stew. For once, he was the one sweating, pacing, waiting for me. And it felt damn good. I waited 2 full days before answering. Finally, I typed. "I want you to understand what it feels like when someone tries to take everything from you. We're just getting started." No threats, no specifics. Just enough to keep him guessing. Within an hour, my father called. His voice was different this time, not angry, not commanding, but measured. Almost pleading. "Paula, listen to me. I don't know what you think you found, but you need to stop. This isn't a game." "Oh, I know it's not a game," I said. "You made it clear when you tried to humiliate me at Daniel's wedding. Now you're going to learn what happens when you push me too far." He went quiet. For once, my father, the man who always had an answer, who always thought he was the smartest in the room, had nothing to say. That silence told me everything. Over the next week, I tightened the screws. A leaked email here. A whispered tip to a journalist there. Not enough to blow everything up at once, just enough to make their lives uncomfortable. Daniel lost a freelance gig he was bragging about after the client suddenly reconsidered. Mom had her credit card declined at a high-end boutique, thanks to some well-timed attention to her gambling debts. Dad stopped showing up at his country club after the whispers about his business started to spread. The best part? None of it could be traced back to me. To the outside world, it looked like their perfect little empire was crumbling all on its own. But behind the scenes, they knew. And that knowledge was eating them alive. Late one night, Daniel finally broke. He showed up at my apartment building, pounding on the door until I opened it. His hair was a mess, his eyes bloodshot. "Paula," he said, voice hoarse, "please. Just, tell me what you want to make this stop." I looked him dead in the eye and said, "I want you to admit the truth. To me. To everyone. That you've been handed everything your whole life, that you tried to steal what I built, and that you're nothing without the family cleaning up your messes." He clenched his jaw, fists at his side. For the first time, Daniel looked small. Weak. And I realized, I had him exactly where I wanted him. But I wasn't going to let him off with just words. No, I was saving the real blow for later. This was just the beginning of his breaking. I knew getting Daniel to admit the truth privately wasn't enough. He had lived his entire life behind the safety net my parents built for him. If he was ever going to feel the weight of accountability, it had to be public. The opportunity came faster than I expected. 2 weeks later, Daniel was invited to speak at a local entrepreneurship panel, ironically titled, "Next Generation Leaders." Of course, Dad had pulled strings to get him on the stage, hoping to polish Daniel's image after the recent gossip. That was my moment. I had everything ready, the HR complaints, the screenshots, the voice recording of his late-night harassment, and proof of Dad's hush money payments. I wasn't reckless, I didn't dump it all online. Instead, I slipped the package to a reporter I trusted, someone who had already sniffed around Dad's business dealings. I told her, "Check your inbox in 15 minutes. And maybe send someone to cover that panel." When Daniel stepped onto the stage in his new suit, grinning like he was born to be there, I watched from the back of the room. His voice carried across the auditorium, all smooth charm. Building a business is about vision, integrity, and leadership. The reporter's phone pinged. She opened her laptop. Within minutes, her face hardened. She raised her hand. "Mr. Hayes," her voice sliced through the room, "how do you reconcile this talk about integrity with the fact that you were fired from 2 previous jobs for sexual harassment?" The room froze. Daniel stammered. That's not, those were misunderstandings." She didn't let him off the hook. "What about the $25,000 settlement your father paid to silence a former coworker? Or the late-night messages you sent to another, which I have right here?" Gasps rippled through the audience. Phones lit up as people scrambled to fact-check in real time. Daniel's face drained of color. He looked around, desperate for an exit, but there was none. For the first time, the Golden Boy's sins weren't whispered in private or buried under Dad's money. They were laid bare under bright lights, in front of cameras. I slipped out quietly before the panel ended. By the time I got home, Daniel's name was trending locally on Twitter. His LinkedIn was flooded with angry comments. Megan's sister posted again, "Guess I wasn't exaggerating after all." Daniel had always lived as the family's pride. That day, he became their shame. And watching it unfold, I knew I had finally tipped the scales. But my war wasn't finished, not until Mom and Dad tasted their own downfall too. Daniel's public collapse shook my family like an earthquake. By the end of that week, he had gone into hiding at my parents' house, and Mom was fielding calls from concerned friends, while Dad scrambled to do damage control. It was almost funny watching them scramble. For decades, they'd held themselves up as the picture of respectability, the polished suburban couple with 2 perfect kids. Now one of those kids was a trending disgrace, and their silence only made it worse. But I wasn't done. If Daniel's fall was the earthquake, my parents were about to face the tsunami. I decided to start with Mom. Her gambling habit had always been a family secret, something she excused with lines like, "It's just for fun," or "Everyone needs a hobby." But her hobby had cost tens of thousands over the years. I had the receipts, literally. I pulled her credit card statements, bank transfers to online casinos, even her membership info for a couple of shady underground poker nights she swore she never attended. Then, I reached out to the charity organizations she loved to flaunt. In polite, carefully worded emails, I laid it out: before you continue to allow her to represent your board, you should be aware of where some of her donations are really coming from. It didn't take long. Within a month, her name quietly disappeared from 3 different committees. Her best friends stopped inviting her to brunch. And when I walked past her at the grocery store one afternoon, I overheard whispers, "That's her. Can you believe she lost all that money to online slots?" The look on her face said it all. She was no longer the glamorous socialite. She was a cautionary tale. Then came Dad. His downfall needed to be bigger. Louder. Permanent. I went back to the journalist I had trusted with Daniel's story. This time, I dropped everything: the tax records, the shell company documents, the overseas transfers. It wasn't a whisper anymore. It was a file thick enough to ruin him. 2 weeks later, the headline hit: local consultant tied to money laundering scheme. It spread fast. News anchors said his name with that measured disgust reserved for disgraced businessmen. Neighbors avoided their driveway. By the end of the week, federal agents were knocking on their door. I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. I just sat in my office, watching the world catch up to the truth I'd known for years. The people who tried to humiliate me at a wedding were now the ones drowning in public shame. But as satisfying as it was, I knew it wasn't the end yet. My war wasn't just about payback, it was about freedom. And I wasn't walking away until I had it completely. When the FBI showed up at my parents' house, I thought that would be the final nail. But I underestimated them. Cornered people don't go quietly, they lash out. 3 days after Dad's name hit the news, I got served. A thick envelope, hand-delivered to my office. Inside, a lawsuit. My parents and Daniel were accusing me of corporate misconduct, claiming I had built my company with funds stolen from the family. It was laughable. Every dollar I earned came from sleepless nights and contracts I fought tooth and nail for. But on paper, lawsuits look messy. And they knew it. They weren't trying to win in court, they were trying to drag me through the mud, to make people second-guess the woman who had suddenly risen while her family crumbled. Allison found me at my desk that night, staring at the papers. "They're trying to flip the story," she said. "Make you the villain." I rubbed my temples. Yeah. It's their last card. But here's what they didn't realize: I had been preparing for this possibility since the night of Daniel's wedding. My company's books were spotless. I had 3 separate accountants review them yearly. Every loan, every payment, every dime was documented. If they wanted a courtroom battle, I was ready. Still, I knew I needed to do more than just defend myself. I needed to strike back, publicly, decisively. The next week, I held a press conference. Cameras, microphones, the whole deal. I stood there in a navy blazer, hair pulled back, no nonsense. "My family has accused me of misconduct," I said clearly. "I want to be very clear, those accusations are false. Here are the receipts." I handed over binders of financial records. Every reporter got one. Every record backed up my story. Then, I went further. While they accuse me, the truth is, my family has spent years hiding their own crimes. The evidence is already out there. What you've seen in the news about my father is just the beginning. The room buzzed. Flashes went off. I could practically feel my parents and Daniel watching the broadcast, their blood pressure spiking. For years, they had held the power because they controlled the narrative. But that night, I ripped it away from them. They wanted a public war. I gave them one. And the world was finally starting to see them for who they really were. The day of the first hearing felt surreal. I sat in the courthouse hallway, crisp navy suit, binder on my lap, while across from me sat my parents and Daniel. Mom wouldn't look at me. Dad wore his serious businessman face, the same one he'd used to intimidate people my entire life. And Daniel? He kept bouncing his leg, his hands clenched, like a kid waiting outside the principal's office. They had their lawyer, a sharp-tongued man in $1,000 suit. I had mine, a quiet but relentless woman named Grace, who'd spent her career dismantling cases just like this. When we walked into the courtroom, I half expected my stomach to twist, to feel that old daughterly guilt pulling me down. But instead, I felt steady. Calm. Like I had already won. Their lawyer went first, spinning a story about how I had taken advantage of family resources to build my business, how I had stolen from Dad's firm to fund my company. It was a story built on smoke and resentment, and for a while, the judge just listened, nodding politely. Then it was Grace's turn. She rose, smooth and unshaken, and laid out the facts. Every loan I had ever taken, every repayment, every contract signed. Your Honor, she said, sliding the thick binder across the table, these are Ms. Hayes' books, audited by 3 independent firms. They are flawless. Then she pivoted. On the other hand, Mr. Hayes' financial records tell a different story. The FBI investigation currently underway into his firm for fraud and money laundering raises questions about who, exactly, has been dishonest in this family. The judge's eyes flicked toward my father. The courtroom went still. I didn't have to say a word. The documents spoke for me. By the end of the session, the lawsuit was dismissed as baseless. Not only dismissed, our lawyer filed a motion for them to cover my legal fees. The judge granted it without hesitation. When we walked out, Mom's face was pale, Dad's jaw locked, and Daniel wouldn't meet my eyes. For once, they weren't the ones holding the power. Allison met me outside the courthouse, grinning like a kid at Christmas. Paula, she said, hugging me tight, you didn't just beat them. You buried them. But deep down, I knew I wasn't finished yet. This wasn't just about winning in court. This was about closing the chapter, for good. And I had one last move to play. The lawsuit's collapse left my family cornered. They had nothing left to hit me with, no credibility, no leverage, no allies. But I wasn't satisfied with just beating them in court. I wanted to make sure they could never claw their way back into my life, or anyone else's, with the same arrogance they always had. That meant finishing what I started. I went back to the journalist who'd exposed Dad's shady finances and Daniel's harassment. This time, I didn't just hand her documents, I handed her a story. I told her everything. The wedding ambush. The wine. The blackmail attempts. The baseless lawsuit. For years, my family had controlled the narrative, painting me as the difficult daughter while covering up their own rot. Now it was my turn. The article hit like a bomb. Daughter targeted after exposing family's secret crimes. It wasn't just numbers and allegations, it was human. My story. My voice. The image of Mom dumping wine over me at Daniel's wedding became the opening scene, a symbol of what it meant to be the scapegoat in a toxic family. Readers ate it up. The piece spread online, thousands of comments pouring in. People weren't just outraged, they related. They saw themselves in my story. Suddenly, I wasn't just Paula, the woman feuding with her family. I was Paula, the business owner who stood her ground, the woman who refused to be silenced. And the ripple effect crushed what was left of them. Dad's pending fraud investigation turned into a full-blown federal case. Mom, once queen of her social circles, became a pariah. No one wanted to be photographed next to her, not with that article circulating. Daniel, already disgraced, lost what little sympathy he had left when more women came forward after reading the piece. For years, they had lived on reputation. Now, their reputation was poison. The night the article went viral, I sat on my balcony with Allison, a glass of wine in my hand. The city lights sparkled below us. You did it, she said softly. You ended it. And for the first time since that wedding night, I felt it too. The war was over. I had won. But the best part wasn't their downfall. It was the freedom that came with it. I had cut the chains for good. Peace didn't come overnight. After years of living under my family's grip, I half expected the phone to ring every day with another threat, another attempt to pull me back in. But it didn't. The silence was strange at first, unsettling, almost. And then, slowly, it became beautiful. My business thrived in the aftermath. Clients who had seen the headlines admired the fact that I stood tall through the storm. Some even told me they signed contracts with me because of what I endured, because they trusted someone who had the guts to fight back against corruption, even when it was in her own bloodline. Allison and I celebrated small victories, landing new accounts, hitting revenue milestones, hiring our 50th employee. My office buzzed with energy, no longer clouded by the fear of sabotage. I walked in every morning with my head high, knowing that everything inside those walls existed because of me and no one else. But the real peace came in the quiet moments. Saturday mornings with coffee on my balcony, no frantic voicemails from mom playing in my head. Evenings where Allison and I cooked pasta and laughed until midnight, no longer dissecting my family's schemes. Vacations I took for the first time in years, real ones, where I wasn't afraid of what chaos I'd return to. The absence of their voices, their demands, their manipulations, it was like learning to breathe again. One night, I pulled an old photo album from my closet. Family pictures. Birthdays. Holidays. Smiling faces that, for so long, I had tried to convince myself were real. I looked at them with fresh eyes and realized something: those smiles weren't for me. They were for the image. For the performance. And I wasn't part of that performance anymore. Closing the album, I whispered out loud, almost to myself, I'm finally free. It wasn't about revenge anymore. That was done. This was about living, truly living, without chains, without shame, without waiting for approval that was never going to come. For the first time in my 32 years, the life in front of me was mine. Entirely, unapologetically mine. It's been a year since the wedding. A year since the wine, the humiliation, the words that split me from my family for good. I'm done being your daughter. If you had told me then that I'd come out of it stronger, I would have laughed. That night, I felt ruined, like everything I had worked for was about to be stolen or destroyed. But looking back now, I realize that moment wasn't the end of me. It was the beginning. My father is still under investigation. His name, once polished and respected, is now shorthand for corruption in our city. My mother spends her days in seclusion, cut off from the friends she once lorded over. Daniel, well, last I heard, he moved out of state. His marriage never survived the fallout. He tried to reach out once, a pathetic, half-hearted email about starting fresh. I deleted it without responding. For so long, I thought cutting ties with my family would leave me empty. But instead, I found space, space to grow, space to breathe, space to build a life that was mine alone. My company is thriving. I've opened a second office, hired dozens more employees, and even started a mentorship program for young women in business, women who remind me of myself, struggling to be taken seriously while the world doubted them. Every time I see one of them succeed, it feels like a victory bigger than any revenge I could have planned. And me? I'm happy. Truly, quietly happy. I still have Allison, my rock through all of this, and I've let new people into my life too. People who value me for who I am, not for what they can take. Sometimes, late at night, I think about that girl who walked into her brother's wedding, still desperate, deep down, for her family's approval. She doesn't exist anymore. She died the moment I stood there, drenched in red wine, and chose myself over them. And the woman who walked out of that ballroom? She's the one telling you this story now. My name is Paula. I am 32 years old. And I am no longer my family's daughter. I am my own. And that's the happiest ending I could have ever written.